Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, Russia's held a serious numerical advantage over Ukraine in the air. President Vladimir Putin's army has had greater numbers across the different categories of military aircraft, including many newer, more advanced aircraft. That's given it the advantage in the air, particularly on the front lines, where for most of 2025, Russian Su-34s have dropped thousands of FAB glide bombs, while Ukraine had only a limited number of land-based air defense systems available to counter them. Now, all of that may be about to change forever, thanks to a letter. Here's how a pending agreement between Ukraine and Sweden could decisively impact the entire course of the war. Now, this isn't any ordinary letter. It's a letter of intent signed on October 22, 2025 between Sweden and Ukraine that would see Ukraine receive between 100 and 150 Gripen E series fighter jets, a machine that's ready to take full advantage of the unique Ukrainian landscape. It would, according to Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, give Ukraine a very serious air force. Acquiring the Gripen is a savvy choice for Ukraine in a war that's not been particularly fruitful for the air forces of either side. In conflicts like the Iraq War, the war in the Balkans, and even Israel's wars against Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, air power has played a significant role. But the Ukrainian and Russian air forces have been far less impactful in that conflict. That's in part due to the overall lack of quality of both air forces compared to, say, the US's array of F-35 Lightnings, F-22 Raptors, F-18 Super Hornets, and strategic bomber fleet. It's also based on the quality, or lack thereof, of both sides' layered air defense systems, which have left Ukraine and Russia reluctant to deploy high-value aerial assets close to the front lines due to the high likelihood of them being shot down. Now, before the war began, Russia had an air force comprised of around 900 fourth-generation and higher aircraft, including around 14 fifth-generation Su-57s, 365 Su-35s, Su-27 and Su-30s combined, and 134 Su-34s. But by the end of 2024, Russia had lost at least 130 fixed-wing aircraft and 146 helicopters, almost a third of its fleet. Ukraine's air force, meanwhile, has been devastated to an even greater extent. Before the war, Ukraine only had around 120 operational fighter jets, almost all of which were aging Soviet-era planes like the MiG-29 Fulcrum, Su-24 Fencer, Su-25 Frogfoot, and Su-27 Flanker. Ukraine was further able to refurbish several older, decommissioned jets and add them to the fray. However, by the end of 2024, at least 100 Ukrainian aircraft have been confirmed as lost, including 89 fighter aircraft. That means there are perhaps only a dozen or two of Ukraine's original fighters still operational. In theory, Russia's fighter jet industry, which is estimated to produce between 22 and 49 jets annually, should be mostly able to make up for its losses, at least for its lost Su-30, 35 and 34 fighters. For all its enterprise and ingenuity, Ukraine simply doesn't have that kind of aeronautical capacity available. The 2024 announcements that Ukraine would receive US-manufactured F-16s and French Mirage 2000F fighter jets sparked optimism that Ukraine's air force could finally gain meaningful improvements to compete in the air. Yet, although exact figures aren't available, only a few of these aircraft have been delivered so far, and the total expected deliveries will still leave Ukraine's fleet smaller than Russia's by a significant margin. As of November 2025, Ukraine is said to have received at least 7 F-16s, of which at least 3 have been lost. Altogether, around 85 F-16s have been committed to Ukraine for combat use in total, primarily by the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, and Norway. Around 20 Mirage 2000Fs have been committed by France, with the first 3 already believed to have been delivered. With a full complement delivered, these planes could make a huge difference to Ukraine's ability to dominate its airspace. However, for now, they're not really being used on the front lines or to engage Russian fighters directly. There just aren't enough of them. Rather, they're primarily being used in the role of air defense in the rear, helping to bring down the Russian missiles and German drones that terrorize Ukraine's cities and civilian infrastructure nightly. A big part of Ukraine's problem in activating what remains of its air force is the vulnerability of its main air bases. Ukraine has at least 20 air bases, including those located at Artsiz, Chernihiv, Chortkiv, Lutsk, Melitopol, Mirhorod, Nizhyn, Okterka, Ovruch, Ozerny, Priluki, Starokonstyuntiniv, Styry, and Vilka Krucha, along with Dnipro and Kyiv-Zuliany international airports. However, like its air force, most of Ukraine's air bases were inherited from the Soviet Union. So, although most of them have been substantially modernized since independence in 1991, the Russians know exactly where they are and their vulnerabilities. As a result, Russia has struck these bases regularly with missiles and drones, making them distinctly unsafe places to park military aircraft. The Ukrainian solution has been to disperse its fighters between its airfields, which are often small and not in optimal condition. This is a particular issue when it comes to Ukraine's F-16s and Mirage 200Fs, which require more delicate treatment and longer runways than the technically inferior but more rugged Soviet counterparts. The F-16 in particular requires clean, well-maintained runways due to its large engine intake and lightweight landing gear, but its design makes them vulnerable to foreign object debris, or FOD. They have no anti-FOD system, and their gaping under fuselage intakes practically suck up dirt and rocks. While Ukrainian brigades do fly the F-16 from dispersed airstrips, they do so with great care, including with the help of specially assembled mobile units containing all the support equipment needed to launch and land a delicate F-16 on a dirty runway. The fear is that the act of upgrading Ukraine's airfields to be able to effectively use them for its F-16s would be visible to Russian satellites, making them high-priority targets. As Justin Bronk, an air warfare analyst for Britain's Royal United Service Institute, or RUSI, think tank put it, "You'd have to do a lot of work to get those Ukrainian old Soviet pattern runways to a clean enough state to use an F-16 without high risk of foreign object debris going in and damaging the engines. So you'd be looking at resurfacing work on runways and potentially extension work, all of which is highly visible to Russia's satellites as well as to the sources Moscow has on the ground." The F-16 also needs a longer runway, between 1,650 and 2,600 feet, depending on the payload it's carrying, which automatically limits the number of airfields at which it can be deployed. The Mirage 2000 also requires a minimum takeoff distance of around 1,650 feet at sea level when operating with two infrared missiles, making many of Ukraine's airfields unsuitable. However, it's capable of operating from relatively austere and shorter runways compared to the F-16, making it better suited for Ukraine's rugged or less prepared airfields. And this is precisely why the choice of the Swedish Gripen E series fighter to rebuild Ukraine's air force around is such a savvy decision. There's a second reason why the Gripen is a sound choice for a long-term military aviation partnership. With the US increasingly signaling its withdrawal from direct military support for Ukraine, that baton has fundamentally passed to Europe. The European NATO members have committed to increasing their defense spending from the current level of around 2% of GDP to 5% of GDP by 2035. In line with that commitment, the European nations have signaled that they intend to use this opportunity to expand their own defense industries, rather than relying as heavily on US-supplied weaponry as they have over the past few decades. So it makes sense for Ukraine to pursue long-term relationships with the defense industries of the nations that will be directly supporting it. However, the primary reason why the Gripen is such a good fit is that the plane was specifically designed for use on shorter, more rugged airfields, and to combat the Soviet and Russian way of aerial warfare. Indeed, Sweden designed the jet in the 1980s specifically to survive Soviet strikes on air bases. The planes were built to operate from highway strips scattered across the country rather than the big, immaculately maintained air bases that would surely be primary targets during a Russian attack, as they have been in Ukraine. There's a similar rationale behind the design of Ukraine's Soviet MiG-29s, which were also built to be usable on shorter, rougher airfields if necessary. A MiG-29 only needs a runway of up to 2,000 feet, even when fully loaded, Moreover, as it touches down on its reinforced landing gear, doors close over its gaping air intakes, while gates open on top of the intakes. This system prevents FOD, like rocks, from wrecking the jet's engines when it operates from a dirty airstrip or roadway. Ukraine's Su-24 bombers, Su-25 attack jets, and Su-27 interceptors also come standard with similar anti-FOD systems. The Gripen only needs a runway about the same length as a Mirage, around 1,650 feet, thanks to its canards, which double as brakes. It doesn't have the anti-FOD doors that a MiG does, but it does boast tall landing gear that helps keep it clear of debris and other FOD. That makes it ideal for the dispersed, highly mobile airbase system that Ukraine's been compelled to adopt to keep its air force in the fight. Sweden's approach came from its BAS-90 system, a network of highway strips, hidden fuel caches, and minimal infrastructure designed to survive Soviet bombers wiping out traditional air bases. Swedish planners envisioned mechanics working from trucks, while Gripens took off on 1,650-foot stretches of road between refueling. But while that Cold War clash they prepared for never materialized, the concept might finally be put into practice in Ukraine. Of course, there's plenty more to recommend about this nuggety, robust fighter than just its high suitability for Ukraine's wartime circumstances. The JAS-39 Gripen E, to use its full name, is classified as a 4++ generation fighter with improved stealth and additional protection. It's a single-seat, multi-role fighter aircraft designed for air-to-air, air-to-ground, and reconnaissance missions, offering flexible operations, rapid turnaround times, and low operational cost. All of this functionality is a great fit with Ukraine's requirements. It's powered by a single General Electric F414 GE39E turbofan engine, which provides a thrust of approximately 98 kilonewtons, enabling a high thrust-to-weight ratio and supercruise capability, i.e. flying at speeds above Mach 1 or around 775 miles per hour, without afterburners. The aircraft has a maximum speed of Mach 2 or 1,535 miles per hour at high altitude. In terms of size, the Gripen E has a length of just less than 50 feet and a wingspan of 28.2 feet, with a maximum takeoff weight of 36,375 pounds. It has a combat radius of approximately 930 miles, thanks to an increased internal fuel capacity made possible by relocating the landing gear to the inner wings, and its ferry range can be extended to about 2,485 miles with external fuel tanks. Compared to the F-16 and Mirage 2000F, the Gripen is also believed to be easier and quicker to maintain. Regarding firepower, the Gripen E is equipped with 10 external hardpoints, allowing a weapons payload of up to 15,800 pounds. That includes advanced air-to-air and air-to-ground munitions, including the Meteor Beyond Visual Range missile, which travels at Mach 4 or 3,069 miles per hour and has a 186-mile range, and the AIM-120 AMRAAM and AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles that are also carried by Ukraine's F-16s. The Gripen can also carry the Iris-T short-range infrared homing missile, which has a speed of Mach 3 or 2,300 miles per hour and a range of up to 25 miles, and the 27mm Mauser BK-27 revolver cannon. Plus, it supports an array of other weapons such as the AGM-65 Maverick, RBS-15 anti-ship missile, and guided bombs such as the GBU-12 and GBU-39. This diversity makes the Gripen ideal for Ukraine's purposes, allowing it to carry out missions as varied as air defense, ground attacks, and long-range strike missions. Its ability to drop guided bombs could also enable it to level the playing field when it comes to Russia's aforementioned prodigious use of FAB glide bombs on the front lines. The Gripen's avionics include the Leonardo Raven ES-05 ISA radar, which provides a wide field of coverage and multi-target tracking, and the Skyward G infrared search and track system for passive detection of stealth or non-emitting targets. To further enhance situational awareness for pilots, a cockpit panoramic display, as well as a helmet-mounted display, enable efficient, speedy data fusion from its numerous sensors. The aircraft is also equipped with the TID-LS Tactical Data Link system for real-time information sharing with allied units and command networks. includes an advanced electronic warfare suite such as the Arexis system, and supports secure communication via Link 16 and satellite systems. Another very appealing feature of the Gripen E from the Ukrainian perspective is its low operational cost, estimated at $5,800 to $8,500 per flight hour. That makes it one of the most cost-effective modern fighters around. Ukraine's MiG-29s are estimated to have a similar operational cost at around $6,500 per flight hour, but it's difficult for Ukraine to acquire the parts to maintain them. The operational cost of a Mirage 2000F is also comparatively low, ranging from an estimated $2,700 to $8,200 per flight hour, depending on the configuration and inclusion of fuel and/or maintenance. By contrast, F-16s are estimated to cost up to $27,000 per flight hour, and the F-35 Lightning II anywhere from $33,000 to $42,000 per hour, reflecting the serious effort required to maintain its advanced stealth technology and complex systems. So, while the Gripen is cost-effective to operate, the Gripen E is still significantly more expensive than the other planes in Ukraine's fleet. Ukraine's Mirage 2000Fs are estimated to cost around $23 to $35 million each, while its MiG-29s are estimated to cost $40 to $50 million each. Ukraine's modernized F-16s are estimated to cost $64 to $70 million each. But at an estimated $85 to $138 million each, the Gripen E is significantly more expensive. In fact, it's in the same ballpark as the 5th generation F-35 Lightning II, which goes for $77 to $112 million, depending on the configuration and support package. Indeed, one of the big open questions about the Ukrainian Gripen deal is how Ukraine is going to finance the planes, especially given the size of the projected deal. The letter of intent was signed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his Swedish counterpart, Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, in Linköping, Sweden, where the Gripens are manufactured by giant Swedish conglomerate Saab. Kristersson stated that the signed letter opens the way for the potential supply of 100 to 150 Gripen E series fighter jets to Ukraine. Now, even if Ukraine gets the low-end price per Gripen of $85 million each, that's still a cool $8.5 billion for 100 jets and $12.7 billion for 150. Right now, it's difficult to see where Ukraine is going to get that kind of money from. Ukraine's state budget deficit in 2025 is forecast to reach around 21.1% of GDP, down slightly from 2024's 17.6%, with the draft 2026 budget projecting a further reduction to 18.4% of GDP. By contrast, despite the impact of unprecedented sanctions from across the Western world, Russia's budget deficit in 2025 is only projected to be 2.5% of GDP, moderating slightly to around 1.6% of GDP in 2026. Making the Ukrainian financial situation even more acute is its fiscal financing gap, the gap between state revenues and spending, which for 2025 through 2028 is estimated at $53.3 billion. The total is driven by elevated defense spending, projected at $83 billion in 2025, added to sustain high expenditures on social protection and reconstruction. This gap exceeds currently committed financing of $89.4 billion, leaving a significant shortfall which will have to be covered at this stage by even more foreign financial aid and/or borrowing, or the state will collapse, possibly as soon as Q1 2026. And that amount is becoming an increasing problem for Ukraine to raise. Already, Ukraine is dependent on foreign aid to finance its budget and external accounts. Without foreign aid or loans, Ukraine cannot pay its pensions, government salaries, or for much of its defense spending, let alone drop $12.7 billion on a new air force. Ukraine's ability to cover its debts via raising new loans has become much more difficult and expensive as a result of the nation's credit rating being downgraded to restricted default or RD status by Fitch and selected default or SD status by S&P Global, the two leading global credit agencies. The downgraded ratings follow Ukraine's suspension of debt servicing and missed payments on Eurobond and GDP-linked warrants in 2024 and 2025. So, it's hard to see who would lend Ukraine billions to buy the planes in this precarious position. It's also unclear where aid in the form of donations, as opposed to loans, is going to come from going forward. Even without the Gripen deal, The Economist estimates that Ukraine will need $390 billion in Western financial support through 2028 to sustain its war effort. All the major European economies backing Ukraine are facing slowing economies and growing budget deficits themselves. Plus, they're facing increasing pushback from citizens over the funding of Ukraine rather than much-needed domestic spending. At the moment, the only clear path towards raising the bulk of this funding is the controversial plan to confiscate Russia's assets held in the Eurozone and give them to Ukraine. However, several EU members have blocked the move, which Moscow has condemned as theft and vowed retaliation. Foremost among them is Belgium, which houses the Euroclear clearinghouse holding the majority of Russia's frozen assets. Belgium says that seizing the funds would expose it to significant legal and financial risks, and has called for the EU to take on collective responsibility for any consequences that may follow. So far, the EU as a whole has balked, although it is likely that some kind of arrangement will be made between the members in due course. However, it remains to be seen whether the funding dilemma can be resolved in time for Ukraine to survive intact, let alone finance a fleet of brand new Gripens. Fortunately, at least when it comes to the Gripens, Ukraine has some time on its hands. At the signing of the deal, Christensen emphasized that the document does not mean immediate deliveries, but creates a framework for a large-scale future agreement. Indeed, while the first planes could be seen in action as early as 2026, the deal proposes a gradual rollout of deliveries over a 10 to 15-year timeframe. Hopefully, by that time, the war will long be over, and Ukraine's financial situation will have long since stabilized, and the Gripens can provide the future security for Ukraine that Zelensky thinks they will. We'll keep you updated as the story develops, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching.